the day my only daughter tried to ship me off to a memory care facility. She was standing in my bedroom with her husband, laughing about where to put their new king-size bed. They thought I was still at my doctor's appointment. They thought I couldn't hear Mark say, "Once we get her into that place, we can list the house the same week." They thought I was just a tired old woman with bad knees and a pension. They had no idea the tired old woman secretly owned half a medical plaza, 3 rental houses, and the very company that paid my son-in-law's bonus. Before I tell you how I turned that trap back on them, tell me in the comments, from what city and country are you listening? I love seeing how far stories like this travel. And if you believe elders deserve respect, not to be treated like disposable furniture, hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story about quiet people who refuse to stay quiet. Now, let me tell you how my daughter learned the difference between poor old mom and silent majority shareholder. My name is Margaret Ellison, but everyone calls me Maggie. I am 67 years old, a retired school counselor, and if you asked my daughter Rachel last year, sweet, stubborn, and a little forgetful. If you asked my son-in-law Mark, he'd probably have used 2 words: asset and obstacle. That afternoon started like any other doctor day. I went for my routine checkup in Spokane, Washington, joked with my physician about getting old, and left with a clean bill of health and a warning to take it easy on the gardening. On the way home, I stopped for a cup of coffee and a slice of lemon pound cake. I even texted Rachel a little heart emoji and all good because I knew she worried. Or, at least, I used to think she worried. I live in a cedar-sided house on the edge of a reservoir, the kind of place people in the city fantasize about when they're stuck in traffic. My late husband Ben and I bought it when Rachel was 8. We planted maple trees in the yard, we painted the kitchen cabinets by hand, we fought, we made up, and we burned casseroles. It was home. When I pulled into the driveway that day, Rachel's SUV was parked crooked, half up on the curb. Mark's shiny electric car was behind it. I frowned. It was a Tuesday. They both worked in the city. I walked up the front steps. My key slid into the lock out of habit, but the door was already unlatched. That was my first jolt. I always lock my door. The second jolt was the silence. No TV, no radio, no kettle whistling, just a murmur of voices drifting down the hall. I stepped inside and shut the door quietly. My house smelled like lemon cleaner and someone else's cologne. A faint metallic snick snapped from the back hallway. I'm telling you, if we knock out this wall, we can stage it as an open concept with lake views from every angle. That was Mark, my son-in-law, confident, smug, the same tone he uses when he explains my own phone to me. A second voice, bright and sharp: "Mom won't care. By the time she realizes what's going on, she'll be in a place where somebody else brings her pudding. Rachel, my Rachel." I moved down the hall, my palm tracing the same spots I'd brushed for 30 years. The voices got louder. They weren't in the kitchen, they were in my bedroom. I stopped at the doorway. Mark was holding a laser tape measure, aiming it from my headboard to the opposite wall. Rachel was standing on my rug with 3 color swatches in her hand. I recognized one of Mark's parents' voices on the speakerphone on the dresser. Elaine and Thomas Whitfield, his very particular, very polished mother and father from Bellevue. Mark glanced at the tape and grinned. 14 feet. Perfect. We can put the bed here and a media wall there. Once the house sells, we pay off the line of credit, wipe out those cards and still have enough for the Sammamish place. If we move fast, Elaine's voice crackled through the phone. Those memory units have waiting lists. You don't want to lose the room. People your mother's age decline so quickly. Memory units. Rachel laughed. She already forgot she left the stove on twice this month. I cleared my throat. No, I didn't. You would have thought a ghost had spoken. Mark dropped the tape measure. Rachel spun around so fast the color swatches fluttered out of her hand. The phone clattered, face down on my dresser. Elaine's tinny voice still talking about liability. "Mom," Rachel said, her face going from pale to red in half a second. You're back early." "Yes," I said. My voice sounded frighteningly calm, even to me. Apparently I'm early to my own funeral. Mark recovered first. "Margaret, hey," he said, pasting on the PR smile he used at barbecues. "We were just, brainstorming some updates. For resale. You know, eventually." I looked at my daughter. "Is there a reason my resale is being planned over my bed?" Her features twitched. I could see a dozen excuses fighting to get out. Then something ugly and defensive settled behind her eyes. "Mom, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's just, you're alone here. The house is big. Mark and I have been talking with his parents about options." "Options like pudding," I said softly. "And memory units." The phone on the dresser went silent. I imagined Elaine's manicured finger hitting the mute button. Rachel swallowed. "Mom, listen, you fell in the garage last month. You mixed up your pills once. We're just trying to keep you safe. You're trying to keep yourselves solvent," I replied. "There's a difference." The room went cold. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. And in that heartbeat, I understood something awful and crystal clear. To my own child, I'd quietly stopped being a person and started being square footage. I smiled. It surprised all three of us. "Interesting," I said. "You're measuring my walls, Rachel. Good, because you have no idea what you're really boxed into." And in that moment, something inside me that had been small and apologetic for years sat up straight. They thought they'd caught me on the way down. They were wrong. To understand why my daughter thought she could play games with me, you need to know how I built the very board she was playing on. I grew up in a trailer on the edge of town, with a mother who worked nights and a father who disappeared before kindergarten. There were no trusts, no inheritances, and no family money. There was just work. I put myself through college with scholarships and 3 part-time jobs. I became a high school counselor because I knew what it was to be the kid nobody had time for. I met Ben Ellison, a tall, steady science teacher with oil-stained fingers from rebuilding engines on weekends, in the faculty lounge over burnt coffee and stale donuts. We got married in the church basement with Costco cake and plastic flowers. I thought it was perfect. When Rachel was born, everything revolved around her. She had hand-me-down furniture and brand new books. She had parents who were tired, but present, who went to every concert and every parent-teacher conference. There were no European vacations or designer clothes, but there were camping trips and piano lessons. And there were secrets. They started small. One summer, Ben took a side job helping a contractor renovate a cluster of old bungalows by the river. The developer paid him partly in cash, and partly in the opportunity to buy one cheap. We did the numbers at our rickety kitchen table. What we were thinking was, we can't afford it. What Ben said was, "Maggie, what if we can't afford not to?" We found a way. We refinanced, we ate rice and beans, and we drove our cars into the ground. That first bungalow became a rental. A few years later we added another, and then another. None of it was glamorous. No private jet, just more paperwork, a few more keys on my ring, and tenants who called on Thanksgiving because the heater died. But slowly, quietly, something strange happened. The numbers in our accounts started adding up to something bigger than emergency fund. Then came the real turning point. One of my former students, sweet kid, brilliant, first in her family to go to college, came back to town as a doctor. She and a partner were opening a small family medical clinic, and needed investors to buy into the building. The bank was dragging its feet. Ben looked at me that night. "You spend your life telling these kids someone believes in them," he said. "What if we put our money where your mouth is?" It terrified me, but we did it. Years passed. The clinic expanded. The building was refinanced. Our stupid risk became a steady river of income. By the time I retired, that little clinic building and our rentals were worth more than every paycheck I'd made in 30 years. When Ben died, sudden heart attack on a Sunday afternoon, after laughing at a rerun of some old comedy, I thought about selling everything. It all felt pointless, without his hands on the steering wheel. But grief is strange. I kept the properties because I didn't know what else to do. I kept the portfolio because changing anything felt like erasing him. Somewhere between his funeral and Rachel's wedding, accidental landlord turned into woman with a 7-figure net worth and very basic sneakers. Here's the part I regret. I never told Rachel. I didn't tell her about the growing equity. I didn't tell her about the clinic building, or the short try meetings with the clinic's board where they'd ask my opinion and call me Ms. Ellison like I was someone. I didn't tell her about the quiet meetings with attorney Carla Ruiz, tall and exacting, where we built an estate plan that would survive earthquakes. Why? Because I'd seen what money did to some of my students when their grandparents died. Sudden inheritances that turned solid kids into drifting satellites. Parties, bad loans, worse friends. I wanted Rachel to be herself, To build her life on work and kindness, not on the expectation of mom's money someday. So I let her believe we were just comfortable. We paid for her in-state tuition, not the expensive private college she'd briefly dreamed of. We helped with her starter car but not the brand new one she'd mentioned. I brought coupons to the grocery store even when I didn't have to anymore. She grew up next to a boy named Kyle, whose parents had a boat and a ski cabin. I still remember the day she came home in 8th grade, eyes blazing. "Why can't we have a cabin?" she demanded. "Why can't we go to Maui like Kyle?" "Because I'm a school counselor and your dad teaches physics," I said. "We pay our bills. That's our vacation." She rolled her eyes and stormed off, muttering about how everyone else's parents did more. We laughed it off that night, Ben and I. "Teenagers," he said. "She'll understand when she's older." He was wrong. When Rachel met Mark at a marketing conference in Seattle, she was 27, ambitious, and tired of being the girl from the cute little lake house. Mark came from a world of golf memberships and catered birthday parties. His parents lived in a glass and concrete house that looked like a magazine spread. At first I was happy for her. She lit up talking about rooftop bars and wine tastings. Mark was polite, attentive, and full of stories about scaling brands and leveraging opportunity. But there were cracks. He complained about his parents' expectations, then turned around and bragged about their connections. He made jokes about people who choose to be poor, and didn't realize how my stomach clenched. Rachel picked up some of that language like lint on a dark sweater. "You wouldn't understand, Mom," she'd say when I frowned at some new extravagance. "It's just how things are at Mark's level." Every time I visited their sleek apartment in the city, there was something new: a more expensive coffee machine, a designer rug, a second car for weekend. They made good money, sure, but their spending moved faster than their promotions. When Ben died, I watched Rachel split in two. Part of her crumpled into my arms, my little girl again, sobbing until she hiccuped. The other part hardened into something steely and brittle. At the reading of Ben's will, simple, straightforward, leaving everything to me with Rachel as ultimate heir, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "At least you'll be okay, Mom." I said the words any mother would say. "Don't worry about me, I'll manage." What I didn't say was, "I am more than okay, and I need to protect you from that knowledge, until you're ready." Years later, standing in my bedroom doorway listening to my daughter talk about memory units, I realized I hadn't protected her from anything. I had only protected her illusions, until they curdled into entitlement. She thought I was poor and fragile. She had no idea I was the majority owner of the building where her husband's biggest client rented their office. And she had no idea Carla and I had already imagined a future where greed might turn my own child into my biggest threat. That afternoon, after I caught them measuring my bedroom, I didn't scream. I didn't throw them out. I simply said, "We're going to sit down in the kitchen, and you're going to explain this to me slowly, like I'm as stupid as you apparently think I am." Mark opened his mouth. I held up a hand. "No corporate buzzwords," I added. "Short sentences. No leveraging. No monetize. Just the truth." We sat at the same oak table where Rachel had done her homework. The same table where she once cried over long division, and where Ben had cut out newspaper coupons. Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark took the lead, of course. "Margaret, you know we love you," he began. That's never a good start to a sentence. But this house is a lot. A lot of stairs. A lot of maintenance. A lot of risk. And we've noticed some things. "What things?" I asked. Rachel twisted her hands together. "Mom, you left the kettle on twice last month." I stared at her. "I turned the kettle on twice," I corrected. "I was making tea, Rachel." "She left the garage door open all night," Mark added. "The sensor failed," I said. "I had the repairman fix it." "There was that time with your pills," Rachel whispered. I had laid them out on the counter, then got distracted when my neighbor came by with fresh tomatoes. I had called the pharmacist just to double check. That had been responsible, not sane. But you know what matters in families like this, not the facts, the story. Mark slid a glossy brochure across the table. On the cover, a smiling gray-haired woman in a cardigan held hands with an equally smiling nurse. "Maple Ridge Senior Living," it said, "where independence meets care." I picked it up. I flipped it open. Photos of airy suites, craft rooms, a group of residents doing chair yoga, and one poor man staring out a window at a garden he probably wasn't allowed to step into without signing a waiver. "You want to stick me in a facility?" I said. Rachel flinched. "It's not like that, Mom. Maple Ridge is nice. There's a bistro and a hair salon, and a 5-year buy-in," I said, scanning the fine print. "Paid up front." Mark's face tightened. "We can unlock equity from this place," he said. "Get you somewhere safe and social, and free ourselves up so we're not constantly on edge about you falling or forgetting something." "You mean," I said calmly, "you want to sell my paid-off house to pay for my prison, and your debt?" That landed. Mark's ears red. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She always cried when she felt cornered. It had worked on teachers and boyfriends, and now apparently she thought it would work on me. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm scared. You live alone. What if something happens and no one knows?" There it was, the one argument that wasn't entirely fake. I took a breath. I was afraid of falling on the back steps. I did feel my age when I carried laundry up from the basement. "I hear that," I said, "but you don't get to use that fear to steal my life." "Steal?" Mark repeated, offended. "We're offering to take care of you." "No," I said. "You're offering to take care of my assets." I stood up. My knees popped, but I was steady. "We're done for today. You're both going to leave my house. You're going to give me that brochure, and you're not going to sign or file anything about my care without talking to me again. Do you understand?" Rachel wiped her eyes. "Mom, you're being irrational." I leaned forward until we were eye to eye. "I'm being rational for the first time in years, and you're underestimating the wrong old woman." They left in a storm of muttered frustration and slammed car doors. I watched them drive away, that glossy brochure in my hand, my mind spinning. As soon as their taillights disappeared, I did two things. First, I put the brochure in a folder. Evidence. Second, I went to my bedroom, pulled out the fireproof lockbox from under my bed, and opened the file labeled Ruiz Estate Planning. On top of the stack was a document with Carla's tidy handwriting in the margin. "If anyone tries to push guardianship or involuntary placement, call me immediately." We prepared for this. I had always hoped that line was overkill. A lawyer's worst-case imagination. Now I picked up my phone and dialed Carla's office. "Carla," I said when the receptionist put me through. My voice didn't shake. "It's Maggie Ellison. Remember that worst-case scenario? I think we've just hit it." And that, as they say, was when the game really started. Carla's office is in a brick building downtown. The kind of place people walk past without noticing. No marble lobby. No gold letters. Just a buzzer, a staircase, and a door with Ruiz and Associates etched in frosting. I'd been there before when we set up my will. This time, when I walked in with the Maple Ridge brochure and a folder under my arm, Carla took one look at my face and cleared her schedule. She led me into a small conference room with a view of the river. Detention kids used to say my serious talk face blocked out the sun. Carla had that same face now. "Start at the beginning," she said. I told her everything. The measuring tape. The phone is on the dresser. The brochure. The way Rachel had said pudding made me feel like I was already drooling. Carla listened without interrupting, just jotting down names. Mark Whitfield, Elaine, Thomas, and Maple Ridge Senior Living. When I finished, she steepled her fingers. "I'm going to ask you a blunt question," she said. "Have you given them any legal authority, power of attorney, joint accounts, your signature on anything you didn't read carefully?" "No," I said. "I'm old, Carla, not naive." She smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised," she murmured. "Okay, then here's where we stand. At this moment, you are competent, you are independent, and you own everything you own. That's our baseline." She pulled a thick file from her cabinet. "My file. You remember when we drafted your estate plan?" she asked. I nodded. I remembered the long afternoons and the talk about probate and tax exposure. It had all felt theoretical then, like worrying about floods when you lived on a hill. Carla opened a stapled packet with a yellow tab. "You told me you were worried about one thing. Well, two things," she said. "You were worried Rachel might end up with someone who liked your money more than your daughter, and you were worried she might be too easily influenced." My chest tightened. I had said those words right after Ben died, when grief stripped the varnish off every fear. "So," Carla continued, "we built in protections. The rentals and the clinic building are owned by a holding company. That company is owned by a family right now, you're the primary trustee and beneficiary. Rachel is the successor trustee and heir only under certain conditions." She tapped a paragraph highlighted in pale green. I put my glasses on and leaned in. The language was dry, all in the event that, and whereas, but the meaning was simple enough once she translated. If Rachel or anyone acting with her tried to force me into guardianship or long-term care against my will for financial gain, they'd lose their inheritance. I remembered the day we added that clause. It had felt paranoid, overreaction. I'd almost told her to take it out. Now it looked like a life raft. So, what can they do? I asked. Legally. Carla ticked off possibilities on her fingers. They can petition the court for guardianship, claiming you're incompetent, she said. They can take you to doctors who are friendly to their narrative. They can document every little slip and blow it up. They can't sign for me. Not without committing fraud, she agreed. But fraud doesn't usually stop people who are drowning in debt. I flinched. Do you think it's that bad? Carla slid a manila folder across the table. I already had our investigator do a preliminary pull on Mark, she said. His parents too, public records only, lawsuits, liens, that kind of thing. My heart pounded as I opened it. There it was in black and white. 2 maxed out credit lines. A recent lawsuit against Mark's marketing firm for breach of contract. A quietly dismissed complaint against Elaine's consultancy regarding undisclosed fees. This, Carla said, is what desperation smells like. I stared at the papers until the lines blurred. So they really might try to ship you off? Yes. No sugarcoating. You're the easiest lever to pull. 1 court order, 1 house on the market. Boom. They look like a devoted family. You look like a confused old lady living above her means. It's a story judges see every week. I swallowed hard. I had worked with kids whose parents weaponized concern to control them. I had never imagined my own child using that script on me. Okay, I said finally. So what do we do? Carla's eyes sharpened. First, we document everything she said. Voicemails, text messages, that brochure, any slip where they mention accessing equity or simplifying your finances. Keep a notebook, dates, times, what they say. Second, we get an independent evaluation from a doctor I choose, not one they bring you to. You're sharp, Maggie. We want that in writing. If there's any mild cognitive decline, we'll own it, not hide it, but we'll also make sure it's not exaggerated. Third, she paused, considering. Third, we quietly move the house into the trust with a transfer deed. You'll still live there. You'll still be the trustee. But on paper the asset they're drooling over won't technically be yours to give away. My stomach fluttered. Is that legal? She smiled. The kind of smile that made opposing counsel nervous. It's both legal and prudent. You're allowed to manage your estate while you're of sound mind. If they want to argue about it later, they'll have to convince a judge you somehow foresaw their misconduct and preemptively protected yourself, which is essentially true. She leaned back. Last, she said, we prepare for the possibility that they'll push harder. We will not provoke. Let them make the first blatantly abusive move. When they do, we'll already have the trap built. I thought of my bedroom doorway, of Mark's excited voice measuring wall space, and of my daughter talking about pudding. They already made the first move, I said. Carla nodded. Then we'll let them think they're winning, she said softly. People like that always overplay their hand. I left her office with a checklist, a new appointment with a neurologist, and something I hadn't felt since Ben died: purpose. If Rachel and Mark wanted to treat me like a pawn, they were about to learn I'd spent my life watching people play chess. 2 weeks later, I found the thing that turned my unease into rage. By then I had followed Carla's instructions to the letter. I'd gone to her neurologist, an older woman with kind eyes, and no patience for nonsense, who ran a battery of tests and declared, in her report, that I was fully oriented, making sound decisions with only age-appropriate forgetfulness. I made 3 copies. We signed the deed transferring my house into the trust. Nothing changed in my daily life. I still watered the spider plant in the kitchen, and still fed the neighbor's cat when they traveled. But on paper the Ellison Lake House now belonged to Sunrise Lake Holdings, LLC, which belonged to the family trust. If Rachel or Mark pulled the county records, they'd see a new name on the deed. I waited for the explosion. None came. Instead they came over more often. Rachel started bringing groceries just because. Mark fixed a loose stair rail that had been half done for months. He'd whistle while he worked, pausing to check his phone a lot. I learned to listen to the second layer of his sentence. This railing could be a safety hazard, he'd murmur. Translation: look, Judge, we were concerned. Maybe we should start organizing your paperwork, Margaret, just to simplify things. He'd offer. Translation:
Let us see what we can control. I took notes every night. Dates, times and exact phrases. I wrote like I used to write incident reports. Neutral language, more damning that way. Then one rainy Thursday, Rachel asked if she could use my printer. Of course, I said. The computer's on. She sat at my desk in the den, tapping away. I pretended to fuss with laundry in the hall. The printer whirred and spit out a small stack of papers. Then her phone rang. "Hey babe," she answered, her chair scraping back. "Yeah, I'm here now." "No, she's in the other room." "Shh." I heard the back door open. Her footsteps moved to the deck, her voice lowering. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock and the printer's little cooling fan. I don't snoop. It's one of my rules. But the top sheet on the printer tray caught my eye, because I saw my own name. I stepped into the doorway. The heading made my stomach lurch. Application for home equity conversion mortgage counseling. Borrower Margaret Ann Ellison. Beneath it, lines of information I had never given anyone to fill out. My social, my date of birth, and the approximate value of my house. Under authorized contact, relative, someone had typed Rachel Whitfield. The next page was worse. Consent to obtain counseling and financial information. Durable. I, the undersigned, hereby authorize my relatives to act on my behalf in matters relating to my home equity conversion. At the bottom, there was a line for my signature. It was blank for now. The third page was an email printout. The subject line read, Reverse mortgage pre-approval, Whitfield, Ellison. The body, once we have your mother-in-law's signed consent, we can move forward quickly. The figures we discussed should easily cover the Maple Ridge deposit and your current revolving balance. Timing is key, as the market is shifting. The sender's name was Mark, a loan officer, whose company had been featured in their last ad campaign. I felt the blood rise in my ears. The room narrowed. I had been a counselor long enough to know what panic feels like in other people. It's different when it lives in your own chest. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. On the deck, Rachel's laugh floated through the glass. "She's being stubborn," she was saying, "but she's tired. I can tell. Once we show her how confusing everything is, she'll I gathered the printouts and slid them into my folder. Evidence. Then I replaced them on the tray with a few blank sheets from the printer drawer, angling them just so. When Rachel came back in, cheeks pink from the cold, she barely glanced at the paper stack. "Thanks, Mom," she said, unplugging her phone. "I've got to run. Mark and I have a meeting with a financial advisor." I smiled. "Oh," I said, "planning for your future." She kissed my cheek. "Something like that." The door closed behind her. The smile slid off my face like water. I drove straight to Carla's office. She read the documents in silence, her jaw tightening. "This," she said, tapping the loan email, "is attempted financial exploitation, using your identity to strip equity from an asset that's no longer even in your name, under the guise of care. But they don't know that yet," I said. Carla's eyes flicked to mine. "No," she said slowly. "They don't."
She leaned back, thoughtful. "We could go to the police, right now," she said. "We have enough that an elder abuse unit would at least open a file. But I think we can do something better." "Better?" I echoed. "More educational," she said. "For them." She pulled out my trust documents again, flipping to an amendment we'd added after Rachel married Mark. At the time, it had been theoretical, like planning for a hurricane in a place that barely got stormed. "This section," she said, "allows us to disinherit Rachel if she participates in financial abuse or coercion against you. Right now, it's just words. If we let them walk into a trap of their own making, signing something that proves their intent, it becomes unbreakable." My stomach flipped. "What kind of trap?" Carla's expression was cool. "They want you in a facility and control over your property," she said. "Fine. We give them papers that look like they get exactly that. A care and management agreement with places for them to sign as responsible children. But in reality, the document will do three things. Acknowledge in their own handwriting that they believe you're incapable of managing your finance. Acknowledge that they're seeking control over your assets for efficiency and convenience. Trigger the abuse clause in your trust the moment their signatures dry." "Would that hold up?" I asked. "If I draft it, yes," she said crisply. "It will also give us a beautifully packaged file to hand to the Attorney General if they push any further." I thought of Rachel's face on the deck, The way she'd said stubborn like an insult. I thought of her 8th grade anger about not having a ski cabin and of her adult shame about coupon clipping. This will ruin her life, I whispered. Carla softened. No, she said. Her choices are already aimed at that. We're just putting up a mirror before she drags you down with her. We sat there a long moment. Finally, I nodded. Write it, I said. My voice sounded rough. If she signs it, I need to know I did everything I could to give her a chance to stop. And if she doesn't, I'll live with that. Carla squeezed my hand. Then we'll invite them to a meeting, she said. And you're going to play the part of the overwhelmed, grateful mother who's finally seeing reason. I almost laughed. All those years counseling drama kids for school plays, and now it was my turn to act. I had to practice in the mirror. It sounds ridiculous. But try it. Try looking yourself in the eye and saying I can't handle my own life anymore. Even as a lie, it hurts. For the next week, I leaned into the image Rachel and Mark had already built of me. I asked Rachel to show me, slowly, how to update my phone. I forgot which remote opened Netflix. I asked Mark to carry heavier boxes. Every time I did it, I went into my bedroom afterwards, shut the door, and wrote the date and what I'd said in my notebook. 2. Asked Rachel again how to set calendar reminders. Watched her eyes light up when I said I can't keep track of anything anymore. If it had just been Mark and his parents, I wouldn't have bothered. But with Rachel there was a chance, a small one, that she might see the line she was crossing if I drew it thick enough. She didn't. One evening I forgot my pharmacy password and asked her to pick up my refill online. She sighed in that long-suffering way. Mom, this is exactly what I'm talking about, she said, tapping her phone. Your medications, your appointments, your bills, it's too much. You need someone to take over. I let my shoulders sag. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to mine, search. For a second, I thought she saw the steel behind my words. Then Mark walked in and kissed her cheek. And whatever softness had been there was replaced by bright, brittle excitement. Did you talk to her about Friday? He asked. Rachel bit her lip. Mom, Mark's parents know an attorney who specializes in senior care, she said. They suggested we all meet with a lawyer just to make a plan. You know, if something happens. We found someone neutral. Neutral, I thought, picturing the pre-approval email in my phone. Out loud I asked where. Mark named a downtown office building. I smiled inwardly. Carla's firm actually occupied the floor right above that one. That's a bit far for me to drive, I said. What if I choose a lawyer closer to home? Someone I'm comfortable with. That way we all feel safe. They exchanged a look, calculating. Mark shrugged. As long as they're competent, he said. We just need something in writing. Powers of attorney, care agreements, that kind of thing. Carla Ruiz, I said. You've met her, Rach. She did the paperwork when your dad died. My daughter hesitated. She remembered Carla's sharp eyes. Then she thought of Maple Ridge and whatever fantasy house Mark had promised her. Okay, she said slowly. If that makes you feel better. Mark forced a smile. Great. We love transparency, Margaret. I called Carla the next morning. They took the bait, I said. Good, she replied. I'll have everything ready. She scheduled the meeting for a Friday afternoon. I invited Rachel and Mark over for lunch first to talk through my feelings. I made chicken salad and lemon bars. It felt like I was hosting my own sentencing. At 1 p.m. they helped me into their SUV. Because your car's getting old, Mom. At 1:20 we rode the elevator up to Carla's office. Mark was humming under his breath. Rachel squeezed my hand like she was the one about to be examined. When the elevator doors opened, Carla greeted us with that same professional warmth she used at Ben's will reading. Mrs. Ellison, she said. It's good to see you again. And you must be Rachel. And Mark shook her hand firmly. Thanks for seeing us on such short notice, he said. We just want to make sure Mom's taken care of. Carla smiled. That's what we all want, she agreed. She led us into the conference room. There were 4 chairs around the table. 3 of them had neat stacks of paper. The 4th at the head had my file. I sat closest to Carla. Across from me, Rachel chewed her lip. Mark wore his closing the deal face. All right, Carla said, folding her hand. Margaret asked me to walk you through a care and management agreement she's considering. Before we begin, I want to confirm you understand that she is here voluntarily. Yes? Of course, Rachel said. Absolutely, Mark chimed in. And you understand, Carla continued smoothly, that this meeting is being recorded for Margaret's protection as well as yours. Mark blinked. Recorded? Standard practice when we're discussing major life changes with seniors, she said, just so there's never any confusion down the road. He relaxed back into his chair. No problem, he said. We have nothing to hide. I almost laughed. Carla slid the top document from my stack. This is a summary in plain language, she said. Margaret is considering appointing Rachel as her primary helper for medical and daily decisions, with Mark as backup. It also outlines how the house and finances will be simplified, so they can be managed more easily. Rachel's eyes brightened. That sounds exactly like what we've been talking about, she said. It does, Carla agreed. The full legal version is there in front of you. Feel free to flip through as I highlight the important parts. They each picked up their copies. The document was 10 pages. The first 2 pages looked like what they expected: language about care obligations, housing decisions, and financial management. Then Carla began to talk through the middle, her tone steady. This section here, she said, tapping page 5, is where you two acknowledge that you believe Margaret is no longer capable of independently managing her affairs without significant risk. That's the justification for taking on such a big role, yes? Rachel nodded eagerly. It's not that she's incompetent, it's just, diminished capacity is the legal term, Carla supplied. You'll initial next to that phrase to show you understand what it implies. Mark initialed without hesitation. Rachel followed, and here Carla continued. You both acknowledge that part of your motivation is to stabilize and access existing home equity for her care, since she may not fully comprehend modern financial products. You'll sign where it says we are seeking access to and control of her assets in order to manage them on her behalf. I watched my daughter sign her name on a line that literally said, seeking control of assets. Her handwriting shook only a little. We want to be responsible, she said, almost defensively. Of course, Carla said kindly. Responsible children are a blessing. When they reached the signature pages, Carla paused. Last step, she said. Sign and date, and we'll notarize everything. Rachel signed, eyes shining. Mark signed with a flourish. Carla slid the completed documents back toward herself, stacked them and placed them beside my trust file. Wonderful, she said. That's one piece done. One? Mark repeated. Is there more? Carla smiled. Just a bit of housekeeping, she said. And then Margaret has someone very important she'd like you to meet. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. The trap was set. Carla pressed a button on the small recorder in the center of the table. The red light blinked off. For the record, she said politely, this concludes the signing of the care and management agreement. Rachel exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath. Mark grinned. So, what now? He asked. We start looking at facilities. List the house? Carla tilted her head. That's an interesting question, she said. Because there's just one small complication we need to clear up before anyone lists anything. She turned to me. Maggie, would you like to tell them, or shall I? You go ahead, I said. My voice was steady. You're better with the big words. Carla pulled out a different folder, thicker, heavier. The trust. About a year after your father passed, she began, Margaret and I set up a revocable family trust. Over time, most of her major assets were moved into that trust, including the lake house. Mark's smile faltered. The what? The house you've been measuring for updates, Carla said calmly. On paper it's been owned by Sunrise Lake Holdings, LLC for the past 6 months. That company is owned entirely by the trust. Margaret is the trustee. Rachel blinked. I don't, Mom. What is she talking about? It means, I said, that the house is not, and has not been mine personally for some time. It belongs to a little legal box we built. I just live in it. But the deed, Mark started. Carla slid a certified copy of the new deed across the table. Filed and recorded, she said. You're welcome to check with the county. This is public record. He scanned it, color draining from his face. So even if he stopped, realizing how that sounded. Even if Mom needed to move to Maple Ridge, selling the house would be a decision for the trustee, Carla finished. And for the record, the trust document explicitly forbids selling the primary property to satisfy anyone else's personal debt. Silence. Heavy, stunned silence. Rachel found her voice first. Mom, she whispered. Why didn't you tell me? I held her gaze. Would you have wanted my help because you love me? I asked. Or because you knew there was a lake house to inherit? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Mark tried to rally. Fine, he said tightly. So the paperwork is a little more complicated, but we just signed something saying we're responsible for helping her manage everything.
That's what matters, right? Carla's smile was small and sharp. It matters, she agreed. Just not the way you think. She flipped to the middle of the document they had just signed. This care and management agreement you were so eager to sign, she said. It's not a transfer of power the way you think. It's an admission. An admission, Rachel echoed faintly. Yes, Carlos, you both voluntarily signed and initialed statements that you believe Margaret has diminished capacity. You are seeking to control and access her assets. You understand that she does not fully comprehend the financial tools you're pursuing. She tapped the signatures with her pen. That is the textbook definition of attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Mark surged out of his chair. You tricked us, he shouted. You set us up. No, Carla said calmly. I recorded your own words in your own hand. You were under no pressure. In fact, if you'd been truly interested only in Margaret's safety, you would have asked a very simple question. What question? Rachel whispered. Carla looked from one to the other. Why was there no mention of compensation, reimbursement, or inheritance anywhere in the agreement? She said. You didn't care. You just wanted the keys. Rachel looked suddenly ill. Mom, we were just trying to get out from under your bills, I said quietly. I know about the reverse mortgage email, Rachel. I know about the counseling form with my name on it. I know about the line of credit you and Mark discussed with your advisor. Her shoulders sagged. Carla slid another document across the table. This, she said, is an amendment we filed with the trust last week. It states that if any beneficiary participates in financial abuse or coercion against Margaret, that beneficiary loses their place in the line of inheritance. Permanently. Rachel stared at the page, then at me. Mom, she whispered. You wouldn't. You already did, I said, voice breaking a little, when you stood in my bedroom and planned my absence while I was still breathing. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Carla cleared her throat. There is one more guest who should be here for this next part, she said. If you don't mind, she pressed a button on the intercom. Send him in, please. The door opened. In walked Eli Turner, my nephew, my sister's boy wearing wrinkled scrubs and a look of confusion. Rachel's jaw dropped. Eli, she gasped. What are you doing here? He gave her a sad little smile. Aunt Maggie called me, he said. She said you all needed a nurse. Carla gestured to the empty chair. Actually, she said, we needed the new successor trustee of the Sunrise Lake Trust. Mark's mouth hung open. You're joking, he said. I don't joke with legal titles, Carla replied. As of this morning, Eli is the contingent trustee and he was chosen because for the last 5 years he has called his aunt regularly, shoveled her driveway without being asked, and never once in his life has he asked her about her will. Eli looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. I didn't ask for anything, he muttered. I know, I said. That's why I trust you. Rachel stared at Eli like he'd stolen her life. Mark looked at Carla like he wanted to sue the paint off the walls. This is insane, he snarled. You can't just cut Rachel out because we're trying to be proactive. That care agreement won't hold up. Carla's expression turned to ice. It doesn't need to hold up in some imagined courtroom drama, she said. It's one piece of a much larger file. Your emails, the loan pre-approval, the counseling forms, the notes Margaret has taken, the recording we just made. She opened another folder, this one with a different tab. Whitfield Preliminary. After Margaret brought me the reverse mortgage papers, she continued, I had my investigator pull your credit reports. Rachel let out a strangled sound. I am Margaret's attorney, Carla said. If someone is trying to use her assets as a life raft, I need to know how big the hole in their boat is. She turned the folder toward us. Even from across the table the numbers were stark. 5 credit cards near their limit. A personal loan for business expenses in default. A car lease with 3 missed payments. A soft collection notice from a luxury furniture store. Good grief, Eli muttered under his breath. Rachel whispered. Mark, he slammed his fist on the table. You had no right. I had every right, Carla shot back. You sat in this room and signed a document, claiming you were seeking control of Margaret's assets, for her good. You involved yourself in her finances. That opened you up to scrutiny. She clicked her pen. If I forward this file to the Elder Abuse Unit, and the State Attorney General, they will have plenty to work with. Attempted exploitation, coercion, fraud. If you or your parents so much as touched her signature. Rachel turned to me. Tears streaming now. Mom, please, she begged. We didn't. Okay, we did some stupid things, but we're drowning. The apartment, the car, all of it. It's more expensive than we thought. And Mark's bonus didn't come through. And you decided the simplest solution was to liquidate your mother. Carla cut in. Rachel flinched again. I could see her shrinking in on herself. The teenager who once cried because I wouldn't buy her the same jeans everyone else had. What do you want us to do? She whispered. I took a deep breath. I had been so angry, so hurt but seeing my daughter like this cracked open. No excuses left. I felt something else, grief. For starters, Carla said, you're going to sign this. She laid out a new document. This one was shorter. Statement of admission and She summarized. You acknowledge that Margaret is competent. You acknowledge that you pursued control of her finances, in ways that in hindsight were inappropriate. You agree not to challenge the trust, the deed transfer or any future decisions Margaret makes about her estate. And you agree to attend a financial counseling program the court often uses instead of jail time for first-time offenders, if and only if Margaret chooses not to press criminal charges. Rachel stared at the document like it might bite her. Jail, she whispered. You said. I said if, Carla replied. Ultimately, it's up to Margaret. My job is to make sure she understands her options. All eyes swung to me. For a moment, the room disappeared. I saw Rachel at 5 sticky with popsicle falling asleep in my lap. Rachel at 13, slamming her door because I couldn't afford the band trip. Rachel at 22, bringing home a stray cat and crying when we had to take it to the shelter. And Rachel at 35 standing in my bedroom talking about pudding. Do you love me? I asked quietly. She looked up, shocked. Yes, she said instantly. Of course I do, Mom. I just love money more, I supplied. She burst into ugly hiccuping sobs. I was ashamed. She choked. I married into this world, where everyone has nicer everything. I told them you were quirky,
eccentric, that you were comfortable but didn't show it. And when we started drowning, they looked at me like I was stupid for not using you. The word hung there. Using, I thought if we made it about your safety, she whispered, it wouldn't feel so. I told myself we were helping. That it was fate. You had extra, we had less. And it balanced out. I didn't want to see what we were really doing. And what was that? Eli asked softly. Her voice was almost inaudible. Trying to cash out my own mother, she said. No one spoke. Finally I nodded toward the admission statement. You're going to sign that, I said. Both of you. Today. And then, Rachel's voice trembled. And then, I said, you're going to go home and start selling your own mistakes. The car. The extra furniture. The gadget. You're going to call a non-profit credit counselor and show them everything. You're going to live like we did when you were a kid, on beans and coupons if you have to. Until your head is above water. I swallowed hard. You are not going to live as if my bank account owes you oxygen ever again. Rachel nodded, tears dripping on the table. Mark looked like he'd swallowed a handful of nails. And the criminal charges? Carla prompted gently. I looked at Eli. If I send them to jail, what happens? I asked. He sighed. They'll lose their jobs, he said. Maybe their licenses. They'll be broke anyway, and you'll never see them again except across a courtroom. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, I looked at Carla. Hold the file, I said. Don't forward it yet. Let the admission and the counseling be the first step. If they violate any of this, if they try anything again, you send it all. Every page. Understood. Carla nodded slowly. Understood. Rachel's shoulders sagged with relief and shame. You're getting mercy today, I said. Not a second chance at my estate. They both signed the admission. Carla notarized it. The sound of her stamp hitting paper was oddly final. When they left, Rachel tried to hug me. I let her stiffly. Her whispers, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, soaked into my shoulder. Eli stayed behind. When the door closed, he exhaled. That was brutal, he said. It was necessary, I replied. My legs suddenly felt made of lead. He pulled a chair close. What now? He asked. Now, I said. We live with the consequences. That was 6 months ago. In the time since, a lot has changed. And a lot hasn't. Rachel and Mark sold the second car. Then the designer furniture. Then most of the expensive clothes. They moved out of the high-rise downtown. And into a smaller, older apartment.
closer to the bus line. I know this because Rachel called me, voice raw, the day they moved. It feels like we're going backwards, she said. Backwards from what? I asked. From a cliff. She laughed. A short, broken sound. From pretending we were the Whitfields instead of the Ellisons, she admitted. She and Mark attend financial counseling twice a month. Part of the deal Carla negotiated is that I get a quarterly summary, not of their exact numbers, but of their progress. The first report was grim. The second was less grim. The third said, on track if current behavior continues. Mark doesn't come around much. When he does, he's quieter. The slick confidence has been sanded down. I don't trust him yet, but I watch him carry in his own coffee from home instead of showing off some new gadget, and I see a man staring his own reflection in the face for the first time. Rachel and I are a work in progress. For the first month after the meeting, we hardly spoke. She texted, and I answered with one-word replies. I'd look at old photos and wonder if the little girl with ketchup on her nose was still in there somewhere. Then one night, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Rachel stood there with a casserole dish in her arm. It was slightly burned on one corner. I tried to make Dad's lasagna, she said. It went medium. I stepped aside. Come in, I said. We ate at the kitchen table. The lasagna really was medium. We talked about nothing for a while. Work, the weather, my neighbor's ridiculous Christmas lights in April. Halfway through, she put her fork down. Do you hate me? She asked. I took my time answering. No, I said. I don't hate you. I hate what you were willing to do. There's a difference, she nodded, eyes wet. I wake up in the middle of the night and see that brochure, she whispered. I hear my own voice saying pudding. I don't know who that person was. She was you, I said gently. Just you with your worst fears driving the car. She flinched. Will you ever trust me again? I thought about the notebook in my drawer, the admission statement in Carla's safe, and the deed with Sunrise Lake Holdings printed neatly at the top. I will never again trust you with my security, I said. But you still have chances to earn my trust, as my daughter. What does that mean? It means you can show up when I'm sick without asking what's in my will, I said. You can call to tell me about your terrible lasagna. You can visit on Sunday afternoon, but you will never ever plan my life without me again. She swallowed hard. Okay, she whispered. I can live with that. And if you can't, I added, my boundaries don't move. We've fallen into a new rhythm since then. She comes over twice a month. Sometimes with Mark, sometimes alone, sometimes with Eli, which still makes her awkward, seeing him in the role she thought was hers by birthright. He handles trust paperwork with Carla. He handles contractors. When something breaks, he calls me Aunt Mags, and grouses about how much he hates being put in charge of money. Why'd you pick me? He complained once, half joking. You know I'm the guy who forgets his own lunch 3 days a week. Because you forget your lunch, I said. Not because you're out shopping for a new car, and because when I slipped on the ice last winter, you came over with soup without making it a social media moment. He rolled his eyes but smiled. As for me, I made one big change. I moved. Not to a nursing home. Not to Maple Ridge with its bistro and memory care units. I moved into town. Into a smaller sunny condo with an elevator and a view of the river. The lake house that stayed in the trust to be used for family gatherings, retreats, and eventually maybe, as a therapy retreat center, run by one of Eli's colleagues. When I told Rachel I was moving, she panicked. Are you selling the house? She blurted. No, I'm just not willing to navigate those stairs forever. And I wanted this to be my choice, not an emergency decision after a fall. She breathed out. I'm glad you're choosing, she said quietly. So here I am now, sitting at my new kitchen table, telling you this story. I'm not a heroine. I'm not a mastermind. I'm a retired school counselor, who got very lucky in real estate, and a little smarter about lawyers earlier than most. I also made mistakes. I thought I could hide the truth about money from my child forever, and she'd somehow grow up immune to entitlement in a world that worships wealth. That was naive. If there's a moral here, it's not never help your children, or always hide your ass. It's this: protect yourself on paper before you ever need to in person. Don't confuse love with access. And never ever let anyone, no matter how related, convince you that your existence is a burden they're kindly managing. If someone in your life is measuring your walls while you're still breathing, remember, you are allowed to redraw the floor plan. Thank you for listening to my story. If this made you think of someone in your life, good or bad, hit the like button so more people hear it. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have pressed charges or chosen the path I took? And if you want more long real feeling stories about family, money, and standing up for yourself, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.